I had always imagined this day as perfect. A white dress, light and airy, as if woven from clouds, gently embraces my body. Lace softly touches my skin, sending shivers through me. The scent of fresh roses fills the air, their crimson and cream petals scattered along the path leading to the altar. They crunch under the guests' feet, blending with hushed whispers, subdued laughter, and quiet sighs of admiration. The voices merge into a melody, but I hear only one rhythm, my heartbeat. It pounds in sync with each step, with every glance he casts at me. His hand, warm and steady, wraps around mine like a silent vow. His eyes shine with love, pure, undeniable. "You are my everything," he whispers just before the priest begins the vows. His voice trembles, but there is no hesitation in it, only tenderness and reverence. I smile, feeling like the happiest woman on earth. This moment is eternity, this day, the best thing that has ever happened to me. The dance. We spin under the soft glow of lights, his lips brushing my temple, his warm breath searing my skin. I feel his fingers gently pressing against my waist, and with every movement he tells me, "You are safe. I will always be here." Guests applaud. Someone wipes away tears of joy. Some laugh, others whisper in awe about how beautiful we look together. I feel their happiness, but it pales in comparison to my own. I catch his gaze full of promises. I want to freeze this moment, to capture it forever. I don't know yet that in just an instant my world will shatter. Everything feels so real, so perfect. But I had no idea that at this very moment, my fairy tale was already turning into a nightmare. I heard it by accident. Maybe if I hadn't turned my head, if I hadn't walked down that hallway, everything would have remained an illusion. A sweet dream I would never want to wake up from. He said he'd be back in a minute. Just a few words with some friends. He smiled, kissed my hand, and disappeared into the crowd. I watched his silhouette dissolve among expensive suits and elegant dresses, his voice fading until it was gone completely. Minutes passed. 1, 2, 10. I searched for him with my eyes, but he wasn't by the bar, nor among the laughing guests. A spark of unease ignited in my chest, but I smothered it. Everything's fine, I told myself. Maybe he got held up, maybe he stepped outside for some air. But the anxiety kept growing, rising like a tidal wave. I moved through the crowd, past the dance floor, and stepped into a dimly lit hallway. It was quieter here, the distant voices and music reaching me as a muffled echo. And then I heard it. A woman's laugh. Soft, breathless, filled with something that made my heart clench. Then, a hushed whisper. Sounds that had no place in this house. I froze, feeling something inside me turn to ice. My body moved as if without my permission, my legs carrying me forward on their own. The door was slightly ajar. The light behind it was warm, subdued, meant to create a cozy atmosphere, but to me, it felt sticky and suffocating. I peeked through the gap, and I saw my husband, the same man who had sworn his love to me just half an hour ago, whose lips had kissed me at the altar, whose hands had held me close as we danced, gripping me as if he would never let go. Now they were holding someone else, a woman, her fingers tangled in his hair, his mouth on her neck, his hands roaming her back, their breaths mingling as I stood there paralyzed, unable to even breathe. Somewhere far away, on the other side of reality, people were laughing, music was playing, champagne was flowing. My wedding was still happening. But here, this was its end. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there, as the abyss inside me began to tear me apart, pulling me down into a darkness I knew I would never escape. I don't remember how long I stood at that door. A second? A minute? An eternity? The world around me shattered into fragments. The voices of the guests, the music, the flashes of cameras, all turned into a dull hum, as if I had been plunged under water. Even my own breath felt foreign, slow, distant. I watched them. He didn't even hesitate, didn't even look around. His hands moved over her body with certainty, his lips forming whispers meant only for me. I couldn't see her face, just dark waves of hair, slender fingers clutching onto him like he was the air she needed to breathe. I was shaking. My grip tightened on the doorknob until my knuckles turned white. A wild impulse flashed through my mind, to burst in, to rip away their masks, to scream, to hit, to do anything that would shatter their moment the way they had shattered mine. But I couldn't. Because if I did that, it would become real. A sudden chill crept over me. My light wedding dress no longer warmed me, the lace cut into my skin. I wrapped my arms around myself, but the warmth didn't return. I took a step back, then another. Everything inside me was breaking, screaming, begging, but I kept moving. I stepped back into the hall. Guests were laughing, raising toasts, embracing each other. Someone nodded at me. Someone wanted to say something kind, but I didn't hear them. My temples throbbed. The air felt thick like syrup. "Are you okay?" I turned. My friend stood in front of me, her eyes filled with concern. "You look so pale." I wanted to tell her, to say that right now, just a few steps away, my life was falling apart. But my lips wouldn't move. I only nodded and whispered, "I'm fine." My voice broke. I wanted to leave, to disappear. But where? Where does a bride go when her wedding no longer exists? I don't remember how I ended up outside. The air was cold, sharp, burning my throat with every ragged breath. The asphalt beneath my feet felt unsteady, and it took me a moment to realize I was barefoot. My shoes were somewhere back in the hall, next to champagne glasses and people who still believed in a fairy tale that no longer existed. I walked along the path covered in rose petals. The same petals that, just this morning, had felt like a symbol of happiness. Now they just clung to my bare feet, crumpled, meaningless. Somewhere behind me, the music kept playing. Someone was laughing. Maybe he had already returned to the hall, slipping back into the role of the perfect husband. Maybe right now, he was raising a glass to our love. My stomach twisted. I pressed a hand to my mouth, swallowing back the nausea, and took another step. Another. As far away as possible from this building, this night, this lie. I walked, not knowing where I was going. I just couldn't stay there, in the room where the sky had collapsed on top of me. It started to rain, warm, sticky, mixing with the tears I could no longer hold back. I sank onto a cold bench by some fountain. The water trickled softly like a mocking whisper. I looked at my reflection, blurred, trembling in the rippling surface. Who is this woman? Crumpled fabric of a wedding dress, smudged mascara, empty eyes. This isn't me. I closed my eyes. Just wake up. Just go back to the moment when everything was still real. But the dream didn't end. This was reality, my new reality. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there in the rain, hugging myself, trying to stay warm in a world that had suddenly turned to ice. The rain poured harder, turning the thin fabric of my dress into a soaked rag clinging to my skin. I was shivering, but I didn't move. Inside, I was empty. I didn't know how much time had passed until I heard footsteps. Fast, heavy, familiar. "Damn, you're here." I lifted my eyes. Him. He stood in front of me, breathing hard, his hair disheveled, his tie loosened. His lips were still wet. From the rain? Or from her? "What are you?" His voice wavered as he ran a hand over his face. "Why are you here alone? You're soaked. Come back inside, people are worried." I laughed, dry, bitter. "People are worried?" My voice sounded foreign, broken. "And you? Are you worried?" He fell silent, eyes darting like a man caught with a knife over a body, still hoping to talk his way out. "Listen." He stepped toward me, but I pulled away. It's not what you think. Not what I think? I echoed. Then tell me, what do I think? He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. Do I think about how you kissed her, touched her? Do I think about how your vows were just words? How all of this was a filthy lie? He flinched. It was a mistake, he said quietly. I don't know what came over me. A mistake? I stood up, something sharp and burning rising inside me. A mistake is spilling wine on a dress. You destroyed everything. His jaw tightened. I love you. No, you don't. If you did, this wouldn't have happened. He stepped closer, took my wrists. Give me a chance. I'll fix this. I looked into his eyes, dark, deep, once so familiar. Now, a stranger's. You already fixed it, I whispered. You showed me the truth. I pulled my hands free, took a step back, then another. I turned and walked away. He didn't run after me, and that was the end. I walked without knowing where I was going, but with every step, breathing became easier. The tears had long since dried, lost in the rain, leaving only a strange emptiness inside. It felt like my heart should have shattered into pieces, but it kept beating, quietly, dully, stubbornly. By the time I finally stopped, the city was already waking up. The first morning rays of sunlight broke through the gray clouds, slicing them open like a blade. The air smelled of dampness and something new. I looked at my reflection in the window of a nearby cafe. My dress was wrinkled, my hair stuck to my cheeks, my eyes red-rimmed. But I was alive. I stepped inside and took a deep breath. Black coffee. My voice was hoarse but steady. The barista smiled. Rough night? I smirked. More like a new life. The hot coffee burned my lips, but this burn was different. It didn't hurt. It reminded me that I could still feel. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in hours I understood. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Without him.